I woke with both hands wrapped around the cracked rope of the oldest bell in the kingdom of Varsha. That was the first problem. The second was that I remembered this rope snapping. The third was that it was supposed to happen 3 days from now, during the royal consecration, just before half the lower market disappeared beneath monsoon water, and Rajguru Varen blamed the entire disaster on me. My name was Aranya. I was 24 years old, a low-born bell-keeper at the temple of the first rain, and I had just regressed 12 years into my own past. In my first timeline, I had pulled that rope at the wrong hour because Varen's assistant had ordered me to test the bell. At least, that was what everyone said afterward. The great bell had sounded once. The palace reservoir had burst less than a minute later. Water had thundered down the eastern channels, overturned copper stalls, crushed river barges against the retaining walls, and drowned 37 people before the Naga guardians forced the flood back into the Varsha River. Varen had stood in the royal oath court wearing white silk and righteous disappointment, while I knelt in wet servant's clothes. He claimed my unauthorized ringing had awakened the monsoon spirits. The prince believed him. The king allowed him to seize my mother's healing shrine as compensation. I was exiled before sunset. For the next 12 years, I wandered from shrine to shrine, cleaning incense bowls, repairing prayer ropes, carrying water, and listening to bells that priests considered too small to matter. That was how I learned the truth. Temple bells were not merely used to announce ceremonies. Each properly cast bell carried layers of sacred resonance. One tone measured breath, another tested stone, a third revealed the strain inside protective mantras. The oldest bells could hear promises. And the great bell of Varsha did not summon floods. It exposed broken rain oaths. The flood had happened because someone had violated the binding beneath the palace reservoir. Someone had hidden the fracture. Someone had needed a servant to ring the bell at exactly the right moment, so the warning tone could be blamed for the disaster it revealed. I loosened my fingers from the rope. My palms were smooth. No exile scars. No calluses from 12 years of road work. No black mark from the prison chain Varen's men had placed around my wrist. I was really back. Outside the bell chamber, dawn light spread across the temple's red stone courtyards. Flower sellers were arranging marigold garlands beneath carved pillars. Elephant bells clinked on the royal road. The air smelled of wet dust, lamp oil, and the distant river. The monsoon had not begun. Yet, a narrow bronze object pressed against my ribs beneath my tunic. I reached inside and pulled it out. It was a bell clapper, no longer than my hand, dark with age and split by a silver line. I had found it in the ruins of this same temple 11 years after my exile, when lightning destroyed the western tower. It should not have existed yet. Apparently, whatever force returned me had decided that memories were not enough. The clapper had followed me. I held it near my ear. Ordinary bronze remained silent until struck. This one whispered. The first tone was a soft metallic hum that anyone might have heard if the chamber had been quiet enough. Behind it, buried deep inside the bronze, was a second tone. Only I could hear that one. It pulsed against my teeth like distant thunder. False hour. Broken rope. Hidden pressure. Those were not words exactly. Bell language did not use words. It used relationships between sound, breath, and intention. But I understood. I examined the rope. A thin cut crossed 6 of its 9 inner strands. Someone had coated the damage with temple wax to make it look old. The rope had not failed naturally in my first life. It had been prepared. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. I slipped the clapper beneath my tunic. A young woman entered carrying 2 baskets of white jasmine. Her dark hair was pinned with 3 copper flowers, and yellow river clay stained the hem of her skirt. Kavya. In my first life, she had been 17 when the flood took her father and both younger brothers. She had stood outside the oath court and shouted that palace workers had opened the reservoir gates before the bell rang. The guards had dragged her away. No one had recorded her testimony. Now she stopped when she saw me gripping the damaged rope. "You look as if the bell spoke to you," she said. "It did." She raised one eyebrow. I had forgotten how quickly she could make a person feel foolish without actually insulting them. Should I be worried? "Yes," I said, "but not about the bell." A temple gong sounded below. 3 short strikes. The signal for all lower servants to assemble. I remembered what came next. Rajguru Varen would enter the temple before the second morning prayer. He would inspect the consecration preparations. He would notice the rope damage he had arranged. Then he would order me to test the great bell at dawn in 3 days. He would smile when he gave the order. And he would underestimate me because, to him, I was not a priest, cultivator, scholar, or witness. I was part of the furniture. That had worked for him once. It was not going to work twice. The temple of the first rain stood above the capital on 7 stone terraces. At the top sat the great bell of Varsha, suspended inside a tower supported by black granite elephants. Below it were the prayer halls, oath courts, monsoon shrines, kitchens, archives, guest houses, and servants' quarters. Copper channels ran through the entire complex, carrying rainwater into sacred cisterns. Every part of the temple was designed to move water, sound, or promises. Most priests understood only one of the 3. Rajguru Varen understood power. He arrived wearing cream robes bordered with gold thunder patterns. 12 junior priests followed him, each carrying palm leaf records, ritual vessels, or bundles of blue silk. He was 46 years old, broad-shouldered, handsome, and skilled at making cruelty sound like administrative necessity. The prince walked beside him. Prince Aranya was 19 then, eager to appear wise and too inexperienced to recognize that Varen praised him most whenever he wanted something. We servants knelt in 2 rows. Varen allowed the silence to stretch. His eyes settled on me. "Aranya." I bowed lower. "Rajguru. The consecration is in 3 days. Has the great bell been inspected?" In my first life, I had said yes. That answer had allowed him to claim I had certified the rope as safe. This time, I said, the outer fibers have been inspected. The inner strands have not yet been recorded. His smile barely changed. "Is that distinction important?" "It is required by the 7th maintenance rule." One of the junior priests glanced down at his records. Varen did not. "Then inspect it." "Of course." His gaze moved to the bell tower. "You will also perform a sounding test at dawn on the day of consecration." There it was. The order that had destroyed me. I kept my forehead near the floor. May I receive that instruction in writing? The courtyard became very quiet. Servants did not ask Rajgurus to document orders. That was apparently considered rude, unlike framing servants for mass death, which was merely politics. Varen looked down at me. "Why?" "Because the great bell may not be sounded outside the consecration sequence without the seal of the presiding priest." A small crease appeared beside his mouth. He had forgotten that rule because, in the first timeline, I had been too frightened to mention it. Prince Aranya looked interested. "If the rule requires a seal, give him one," the prince said. Varen could not refuse without drawing attention. A clerk prepared the order. Varen pressed his signet into red wax and handed the tablet to me. I accepted it with both hands. One sealed instruction. one link between Varen and the bell. The first piece of the chain was in place. After the inspection, I returned to the chamber alone. I removed the ruined future clapper and tied a strip of cloth around its upper end. Then I placed it inside the smallest practice bell, a bronze bell used to teach children proper striking rhythm. I inhaled for 4 counts, held for 2, exhaled for 6. In the future, an old hermit named Shankara had taught me that sound cultivation began before a bell was touched. Breath shaped the body into the first chamber. Bone formed the second. Bronze formed the third. If all 3 were aligned, a tone did not merely travel through the air. It traveled through intention. I struck the practice bell once. The sound was gentle. The second tone was not. It tore through my skull like a flash of white light. I saw the rope's hidden cuts as lines of pressure. I heard the false timing woven into Varen's sealed order. And beneath both, far below the temple, I sensed a low groan in the eastern water channels. The palace reservoir. Something under it was already strained. I pulled the clapper free and pressed my sleeve to my nose. 3 drops of blood stained the cloth. The artifact had limits. In my first timeline, I had learned them slowly and painfully. 7 strikes in a single day were the most I could survive without losing consciousness. The 5th caused headaches. The 6th blurred my sight. The 7th made my hands shake. An 8th might stop my heart. The clapper revealed truth, but truth apparently objected to being overconsulted. I spent the next hour examining the rope manually. 6 inner strands had been cut. Temple wax concealed the damage. Fine grains of blue palace sand were trapped in the fibers. That sand was used only around the royal reservoir. Someone from the palace had prepared the rope. When I climbed down, Kavya was waiting beside the western shrine. "You were right," she said. "That is usually an expensive sentence." She looked toward the palace hill. "My uncle delivers flowers to the reservoir shrine. He says workers have been moving at night. 11 men, no temple markings." "Did he see who commanded them?" "No, but I saw 2 carts leave through the eastern service gate yesterday. They carried iron tools beneath lotus mats." That matched my memories. In the first timeline, Kavya had seen the workers opening the gates on the morning of the flood. This time, we had 3 days to prove why. I asked her to meet me after sunset near my mother's shrine. She studied me carefully. "You are acting different." "I had a difficult night." "You look 12 years older." I almost laughed. Some nights are longer than others. My mother's shrine stood near the lower market, between a healer's well and a row of copper workshops. She treated fever, snakebite, infected wounds, and childbirth complications in exchange for whatever people could afford. Varen wanted the shrine because it sat above an old river junction. In my first life, I thought he had seized it to punish me. I now suspected he had wanted access to something beneath it. I placed my hand on the shrine's smallest bell and listened without striking. A faint current moved through the bronze. Temple bells were connected by resonance, just as river channels were connected by water. The shrine bell could hear the pressure building beneath the palace. And if I trained properly, so could I. My first public victory happened because a copper merchant tried to cheat a widow. I had not planned it. I went to the lower market the next morning to buy 12 small bells. Good ritual bells required a precise mixture of copper, tin, and river silver. I could not afford those. So I searched the scrap stalls. The lower market spread across 6 step streets beside the Varsha River. Cloth awnings shaded spice sellers, metalworkers, potters, scribes, fruit vendors, and money changers. Sacred cows wandered wherever they pleased, which was usually the exact place someone needed to walk. Kavya followed with an empty flower basket. She had insisted on helping. I told her the work might be dangerous. She told me selling flowers during elephant processions was also dangerous, and at least my plan smelled better. We stopped at a stall owned by a merchant named Badra Sen. I remembered him from the first timeline. After the flood, he became famous for donating grain to survivors. What people forgot was that the grain had originally belonged to those survivors. A widow stood in front of his table, holding an oath contract. Her name was Mira. Her husband had died 6 months earlier, leaving her a copper workshop and a debt of 40 silver panas. Badra claimed interest had increased the debt to 112. "That Mark is my husband," she said, "but he never agreed to triple interest." Badra spread his hands. "The contract says otherwise." The contract was tied to a small shrine bell. In Varsha, significant market agreements were sworn before sound. The bell did not enforce every term, but it recorded whether the speakers believed their own words at the moment of agreement. At least it did when properly tuned. Badra's bell had been packed with wax around the rim. The wax flattened the truth tone. I asked how much he wanted for the 12 cracked bells beneath his table. He looked me over and decided I was poor enough to mock. 2 silver panas each. They are scrap. Then find cheaper scrap. I pointed to the contract bell. Include that one. He laughed. That bell is worth more than you. Then it should have no difficulty proving the contract is genuine. His smile vanished. Several nearby sellers turned to listen. Badra could have refused, but refusing an oath test in public was almost the same as admitting fraud. He shoved the bell toward me. "Test it, bellboy." That was the first time anyone called me that in the new timeline. It would not be the last. I removed the wax slowly so everyone could see it. Then I fitted my future clapper inside the bell. 1 strike. The ordinary tone rang dull and flat. The second tone entered my skull. False witness. Altered interest. Reversed sequence. The pain was sharper than the previous day. I tasted copper and felt warmth beneath my nose, but I kept my expression calm. I adjusted my breathing. 4 counts in. 2 held. 6 released. Then I struck the bell with its original clapper. This time the sound split. A clear note rose from Mira's name. A harsh rattle answered Badra. The written contract shimmered. 3 lines of ink darkened, then peeled away from the palm leaf like burnt skin. Gasps moved through the market. The false interest vanished. The original debt remained. 40 silver panas. Badra stared at the contract. "That proves nothing." "It proves the oath was altered after her husband's death." "You damaged my property." "You packed a witness bell with wax." A market oath clerk had already approached. He inspected the bell, the contract, and the blackened lines. Then he placed a red fraud cord around Badra's stall. By sunset, the merchant's trading license was suspended for 30 days. He was ordered to refund 17 customers and pay Mira 6 silver panas for attempting unlawful seizure. His downfall was not complete. It was not even my goal. But the market had heard what I could do. More importantly, I had heard what I could do. When I struck the bell with a lined breath, the resonance had passed through my wrists and into my bones. A warmth remained inside my forearms, steady and dense. In my first timeline, it had taken me 3 years to discover bone resonance. This time, I had done it in 2 days. Mira gave me the 12 scrap bells. Badra complained. The oath clerk reminded him that fraud penalties allowed compensation in goods. Kavya carried 6 bells. I carried the other 6. "You just made an enemy," she said. He was already willing to steal from a widow. I do not think friendship was likely. She smiled, but then her expression tightened. Across the market, 3 royal guards watched us. Varen had heard. By midday, a summons arrived ordering me to the palace reservoir. The reservoir sat behind the royal compound, surrounded by stone Naga sculptures and 4 monsoon shrines. Water from the northern hills entered through 3 channels and left through 7 controlled gates. Varen stood beside the central gate with Prince Aranya and the chief reservoir keeper. "The lower market is repeating an entertaining story," Varen said. "I would not trust market stories, Rajguru." "No. They tend to improve every time they are sold." The prince almost smiled. Varen did not. He held up a sealed palm leaf declaration. "This states that the Great Bell sounding test is ceremonial only and has no connection to reservoir safety. Sign it." There it was. He wanted my name attached to the separation between bell and water. In the first timeline, no such document had existed. He had created it because I had asked for written orders. My change had forced his change. That was useful. I read the declaration carefully. Then I signed. Kavya, standing behind the flower bearers, looked horrified. Varen looked pleased. He had ordered a servant to certify that the bell did not control the reservoir. I agreed completely. Because the bell did not control the reservoir. The rain oath did. And his declaration had just placed his seal, my name, and the reservoir in the same legal record. He thought he was building a wall between himself and the coming flood. What he had actually built was a bridge. That night, Kavya called me an idiot for signing. She waited until we reached my mother's shrine, which was considerate of her. Public accusations of stupidity were common in the lower market, but she preferred privacy. "You know he is planning something," she said. "Yes." "You know that document will be used against you." "Yes." "You signed it anyway." "Yes." She stared at me. "You are either extremely clever or the calmest fool in Varsha." "I have been both." My mother was asleep in the back room after treating 23 patients. I lowered my voice and showed Kavya the declaration. "Read the 3rd line." She leaned closer. "The sounding of the great bell bears no mechanical authority over the palace reservoir or its 7 gates." "Exactly. I still do not understand." Royal oath law distinguishes mechanical authority from ritual authority. Varen's declaration denies only the first. Kavya frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning he has formally admitted that the bell cannot open the gates, release water, or cause a flood." Her eyes widened. "If the market floods after the bell rings, the bell cannot legally be blamed as the mechanism. Then he will blame you for angering the spirits." "He will try." I pointed to Varen's seal. "But because he signed a reservoir declaration during consecration preparation, the old law treats him as an oath participant in any disaster connected to the reservoir." That was the hidden consequence engine beneath the entire ceremony. 400 years earlier, the first Thunder Bell Wardens had designed the consecration so that no priest could bless the kingdom while hiding a broken public oath. Every officiating priest spoke before the great bell. A true vow created a clear tone. A mistaken vow produced silence. A deliberately false vow cracked the speaker's ritual authority. Not metaphorically. The bell severed the false priest's connection to the mantras they had sworn to uphold. Varen had altered the modern ceremony. He removed the individual oath tests and replaced them with a group chant. He believed no one alive understood why the original sequence mattered. He was almost right. I spent the next 6 hours training. I hung the 12 scrap bells around the shrine courtyard using flower cord. Their sizes were uneven. Two had cracked rims. One had a dent shaped like a thumb. They were perfect. A flawless bell produced one dominant tone. A damaged bell produced several smaller tones. Most priests hated that. I needed it. I stood in the center of the circle and breathed. 4 counts in. 2 held. 6 released. Then I struck the first bell. The note entered my right wrist. I struck the second. The vibration passed into my left elbow. By the 4th bell, my ribs hummed. By the 7th, my knees shook. By the 9th, I collapsed. Cavia caught the back of my tunic before my head hit the stones. This is your clever plan. This is the falling down portion. Very impressive. I rested for 12 minutes, then tried again. The goal was not loudness, it was distribution. Water pressure destroyed walls by concentrating force against one surface. A bell circle could do the opposite. 12 linked tones could spread impact through air, stone, and copper channels. In the future, I had seen a mountain hermitage survive a landslide because 81 prayer bells divided the force across an entire valley. I did not have 81 bells. I had 12, 3 days, and a flower seller who insulted me whenever I lost rhythm. It was enough. Before dawn, I completed the circle once. All 12 bells rang in sequence. The sound passed through my bones, down into the stone courtyard, and out through the shrine's old water channels. For 3 breaths, I could hear the entire lower market. Copper roofs, clay drains, bridge supports, subterranean channels, and something moving beneath the healer's well. A deep, scaled presence stirred in the river junction. A Naga guardian. In the first timeline, Varen seized my mother's shrine less than 2 hours after my exile. He claimed it was compensation. Now I understood. The shrine sat above a sleeping guardian path. He had wanted control of it before the reservoir oath failed completely. A hiss rose from the well. Cavia stepped back. 2 amber eyes opened beneath the water. The Naga did not attack. It looked at me. Then the shrine bell rang by itself. 3 tones. Gate. Wound. Soon. The reservoir oath was not merely cracked. It was bleeding into the river bindings. We had less time than I thought. At sunrise, Varen's officials arrived with an order placing my mother's shrine under royal safety custody. The lead clerk looked embarrassed. Temporary seizure, he said, until after the consecration. My mother stood beside me, pale but composed. In my first life, I had fought the seizure. Guards struck me, and Varen used my resistance as proof of instability. This time I bowed. Of course. The clerk relaxed. Then I handed him the shrine inventory. He blinked. What is this? Under royal safety law, custody includes all registered obligations, patient debts, donation records, medicine guarantees, water rights, and guardian duties. The document contained 206 entries. Once the clerk accepted it, the palace became legally responsible for every healing promise attached to the shrine. That included the Naga binding beneath the well. His face lost color. I was told to take the building. The law does not recognize buildings without obligations. Varen had wanted my mother's land. I gave him exactly what he requested. Along with 87 patients, 14 unpaid medicine orders, 1 sacred well, and a wounded river guardian. Malicious compliance worked best when written by dead lawmakers. The flood village lay 9 miles east of the capital. We reached it just before noon because the Naga beneath my mother's shrine had sent another warning through the bells. 3 tones. Gate. Wound. Soon. The village of Jaipur sat where a branch of the Varsha River curved around a forest hermitage. 64 homes stood on stone platforms above the usual flood line. Water had already reached the doorways. That should have been impossible. The monsoon had not officially begun. Kavya and I crossed the final road on a grain cart. 2 of my 12 bells hung from my belt. A third was tied to a bamboo staff. Villagers crowded around the shrine platform. At the center of the flooded square, a snake spirit coiled around a carved pillar. It was not a true Naga. It was a younger river spirit, perhaps 80 years old, with green-black scales and a pale crest. Water spun around it in a tightening circle. 3 men held spears. A forest ascetic shouted a fire mantra. Everything about the scene was about to become worse. "Stop chanting," I said. The ascetic glared at me. "The spirit has broken its binding." "No, its binding is hurting it." A copper chain circled the pillar beneath the water. One link had been replaced with palace iron. Copper carried oath resonance. Iron blocked it. The river spirit had not turned hostile. It was panicking because someone had interrupted its connection to the reservoir oath. I waded into the water. Kavya grabbed my sleeve. "You have used the clapper once today." "I know. You said 7 was dangerous." 7 is survivable." That was not comforting. The water reached my chest. The snake spirit opened its mouth, showing curved silver fangs. The men raised their spears. I struck the bell on my belt. 1 tone. The spirit froze. I struck the second bell. 2 tones. The spinning water slowed. I lifted the bamboo staff and struck the third. 3 tones. My skull flashed with pain. The second resonance poured through me. Broken chain. False gate signal. Fear. I could feel the spirit's panic as pressure against my lungs. So I answered with breath. 4 counts in. 2 held. 6 released. Then I repeated the 3-tone sequence without the future clapper. The first tone acknowledged the river. The second acknowledged the binding. The third offered stillness. The water dropped from my chest to my waist. The snake spirit uncoiled. Its head lowered until one amber eye was level with mine. I touched the copper chain. "Show me." The spirit struck the water with its tail. A vision entered the bells. 11 palace workers stood beside the eastern reservoir channel the previous night. They loosened a pressure stone and replaced a copper oath pin with iron. The same method had been used here. Varen was weakening smaller river bindings to disguise the pressure building beneath the palace. When the reservoir failed, every damaged binding would release at once. The flood would appear supernatural. The snake spirit slid into the river and vanished. The villagers stared at me. The ascetic lowered his hands. One of the spear carriers asked, "What did you do?" I listened before attacking. This was considered an unusual technique. The village headwoman gave me the broken copper chain. It weighed nearly 4 pounds and carried traces of the palace oath seal. Physical evidence. More importantly, the 3 tones had changed me. The resonance remained in my spine. When I stepped onto the shrine platform, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. My body had become a chamber capable of holding sound rather than merely surviving it. I struck my chest lightly with 2 fingers. A low hum answered from my bones. The first stage of thunderbody cultivation. In the future, it had taken me 7 years to reach it. Now I had reached it in less than 72 hours. Returning to the capital should have taken 3 hours. It took 5 because royal guards stopped us at the Elephant Road. Their captain presented a sealed order. Dev Aranya is forbidden from approaching the Great Bell until the consecration. I read the order. Varen had signed it. Am I forbidden from entering the lower temple? No. Am I forbidden from maintaining the market bells? No. Am I forbidden from performing duty assigned in the consecration schedule? The captain checked the tablet. No. Then I understand. The captain expected an argument. I gave him a bow. Varen had banned me from approaching the great bell. That meant he could no longer claim I tampered with it before the ceremony. Another wall. Another bridge. When we reached the lower market, dark clouds had gathered over the western hills. The first monsoon storm was arriving 12 hours early. Varen's people were already preparing the story. Notices had been posted declaring that unstable temple residents might cause dangerous weather. Citizens were warned to avoid unauthorized bells. My name was not written. It did not need to be. Everyone knew who the bell keeper was. Kavya tore one notice from a post. He is blaming you before anything happens. He did that last time too. What do we do? I looked at the market streets. 6 terraces. 3 main drains. 189 permanent stalls. More than 900 residents in the surrounding houses. In my first life, I had run uphill when the flood came. This time I unpacked the 12 copper bells. We make sure he fails. We had 8 hours before the storm reached the capital. I placed the first bell beneath the eastern bridge. The second went above the grain street. The third and fourth hung from the copper market arch. The fifth was tied inside the healer's well. The sixth went to the ferry steps. By sunset, all 12 formed a wide circle around the lower district. Kavya recruited flower sellers, porters, metalworkers, 2 shrine children, and Mira the widow. I did not tell them we were constructing a magical shield. I told them we were improving the flood alarm. People are more willing to help with practical work than mysterious destiny. Each bell was connected by copper cord or existing water channels. None could stop a flood alone. Together, they could divide its force. Rain began at the 7th evening bell. Not gentle rain. The sky opened as if a river had been waiting above us. Water hammered the tile roofs, drains filled within minutes. The Varsha River rose against the ferry steps. I stood in the center of the market with the future clapper in my hand. 6 strikes remained for the day. I hoped I would need fewer. A palace horn sounded from the eastern hill. 1 long call. Then 2 short. The reservoir gates were opening. Kavya heard it too. That is the signal I saw, she said, in the first flood. She had never lived through the first timeline, but she had seen the same workers rehearsing the gate signal during the previous week. The ground trembled. People shouted from the upper streets. A wall of brown water surged down the eastern channel. It carried branches, broken baskets, roof tiles, and enough force to sweep a stone cart off its wheels. I struck the first market bell. The tone crossed the rain. The second bell answered from the bridge. Then the third. The fourth. The sequence raced around the district. When the flood hit the lower market, the 12 bells rang together. The impact entered the circle. Stone shook beneath my feet. Copper cords snapped tight. Water rose 6 feet against the eastern arch. Then the force divided. Part traveled into the bridge foundations. Part passed through the market drains. Part moved beneath the healer's shrine and into the Naga channel. The flood split into 12 thinner streams. Stalls flooded. Walls cracked. 2 carts overturned. But the district held. No houses collapsed. No one drowned. The people who had mocked my scrap bells began striking them whenever the water surged. Every strike reinforced the circle. That was the thing powerful priests often misunderstood about public magic. They wanted people to watch. Bell cultivation worked better when people participated. The fifth bell suddenly rang out of sequence. A hostile mantra pressed against the shield from the palace hill. Varen was trying to break the circle. I could feel his priest chanting through the water channels. 12 voices. One controlling rhythm. I fitted the future clapper into the central bell. Second strike of the day. The hidden tone exposed the mantra's timing. I changed my breathing. 3 counts in. 1 held. 7 released. Then I struck the bell again, using an opposing rhythm. The hostile chant faltered. Third strike. Pain stabbed behind my eyes. I heard the false rain oath beneath the reservoir. It had 3 layers. The first promised that palace water would be released only to prevent structural failure. The second promised that no consecration ritual would be used to conceal human action. The third bound the presiding priest to accept bell judgment. Varen had broken all 3. He had opened the gates before the reservoir failed. He had prepared to blame the ceremony. And he had removed his individual oath test. The great bell would not merely reject him. It would strip every mantra he had built on those vows. A section of the eastern arch cracked. I struck the central bell a 4th time. Blood ran from my nose. The lower tones entered my bones. My arms became heavy with resonance. For one breath, pale blue light traced the veins beneath my skin. Thunder body. Not complete, but awake. I drove my palm against the bell without the clapper. The sound rolled outward. The cracked arch steadied. Across the market, all 12 bells answered. The flood dropped by 1 foot. Then another. Naga shapes moved beneath the water, guiding the current back toward the river. People began cheering. I did not. The storm was only the rehearsal. The consecration began at dawn. Varen would still control the palace guards, the royal priests, and the ceremony. He would claim the flood proved someone had interfered with sacred water. But this time, the lower market remained standing. This time, 400 witnesses had heard my bells protect them. And this time, Kavya had followed the palace workers to the reservoir gate. She returned near midnight carrying an iron oath pin wrapped in cloth. I saw them remove this, she said. Then they threw it into the drainage channel. The pin bore Varen's private seal. We now had the broken rope fibers, the palace sand, the false declaration, the village's copper chain, the iron oath pin, and witnesses from 2 districts. Evidence mattered. But evidence alone would not defeat a Rajguru. Status could bury evidence. Fear could silence witnesses. Records could disappear. That was why the old kings had trusted the great bell. At dawn, every priestly oath connected to the consecration had to be tested. Varen had changed the spoken sequence. He had not changed the bell. I had one task left. I needed to reach it. The royal consecration began under a black sky. More than 3,000 people filled the temple terraces. Nobles stood beneath silk canopies. Market representatives gathered along the 5th terrace. Palace guards lined the oath court. The great bell hung above us, silent and immense. Its bronze surface was carved with clouds, elephants, naga coils, and 24 lines of ancient oath script. Varen stood beside Prince Aranya, inside a circle of 12 priests. He wore white. Of course he wore white. Men like Varen always dressed, as if laundry could testify to character. I entered carrying the official maintenance tablet. The guards blocked me at the tower steps. Varen looked down from the oath platform. This servant was forbidden from approaching the great bell. I raised the tablet. I was also ordered to perform the sounding test at dawn. The prince glanced toward Varen. Both orders carried Varen's seal. He had created a contradiction. Under royal temple law, conflicting commands had to be resolved in favor of the consecration's mandatory safety right. The chief oath judge examined the seals. "Let him pass." Varen's face remained calm, but the mantra circle around him tightened. I climbed the tower steps. Every movement hurt. I had slept for less than 1 hour. My skull still throbbed from 4 artifact strikes. The day had reset at dawn, but my body had not forgotten the cost. 7 strikes were available. I intended to use one. At the bell platform, I found the rope replaced. A new rope hung from the beam. Too new. Too clean. The cut rope had disappeared. Varen believed that removed the evidence. He did not understand that the bell itself remembered every rope that had touched it. Below, the consecration began. Prince Aranya took the royal vow first. He promised to protect the river roads, maintain the flood channels, and submit palace water use to oath law. The bell gave a thin but clear tone without being struck. The prince's vow was sincere. Immature, perhaps. Careless, certainly. But sincere. The king spoke next. His tone was deeper. Then came the temple officers. One after another, their vows entered the bell. Clear. Clear. Silent. Clear. A silent tone meant uncertainty, not deception. The oath judge marked it for later review. Varen stepped forward last. He had removed the individual priestly test from the written ceremony, but the crowd had already heard the bell respond to everyone else. Skipping his vow now would look worse than taking it. He raised both hands. "I, Varen, Rajguru of the royal house, swear that the monsoon rites were conducted without corruption, that the palace waters were governed according to sacred law, and that no servant of this temple bears blame without cause." The air tightened. The great bell remained silent. Varen smiled. He thought silence meant victory. The oath judge looked uncertain. Varen turned toward me. "Sound the ceremonial note." The same order. The same hour. The same public trap. In my first life, I had pulled the rope. This time, I removed the new clapper from the great bell. A murmur moved through the tower. Then I lifted the bronze clapper from the ruined future. It looked tiny beneath the ancient bell. Varen's smile vanished. He recognized it. Not the object itself. The shape. The old records described the Thunder Bell Warden's clapper as a broken piece of bronze that carried 2 tones. He had read enough history to fear what he did not understand. "Stop him," Varen said. The guards looked toward the oath judge. The judge had given me authority to complete the test. No one moved. I fitted the clapper inside the great bell. Varen's 12 priests began chanting. Their mantra circle rose around the oath platform, white light spinning through sacred hand signs. The chant was designed to stabilize the bell's surface and suppress irregular resonance. It was elegant, expensive, and built on Varen's authority. I inhaled. 4 counts. Held for 2. Released for 6. Then I struck the great bell of Varsha. The first tone rolled across the capital. Temple roofs trembled. Elephants stopped on the royal road. The river surface flattened from bank to bank. The second tone struck only me. For an instant, I heard every vow connected to the kingdom's water. Thousands of promises. Canal duties. Shrine offerings. Bridge maintenance. Fishing limits. Healing obligations. Buried beneath them, all was Varen's broken rain oath. I opened my eyes. Blue-white resonance covered my arms, shoulders, and chest. The thunderbody aura completed itself around me. The priest's mantra circle collided with the bell tone. Then it stopped. Not weakened. Not disrupted. Silenced. 12 trained royal priests opened their mouths, but no sacred sound emerged. Their authority had been built inside Varen's oath structure. The great bell had found the crack. Now every mantra connected to it was breaking. 3 lines of light appeared across Varen's robes. The first shattered when the bell revealed that the reservoir gates had been opened by deliberate order. The second shattered when the iron oath pin in Kavia's hands answered Varen's private seal. The third shattered when the bell repeated his own hidden vow to accept judgment. The sound formed no human words, yet everyone understood. Images appeared across the bell's bronze surface. 11 workers at the reservoir. The cut rope. The wax. The replacement of copper with iron. The early gate signal. The planned flood. Then my signed declaration appeared. The bell cannot mechanically control the reservoir. Varen had written the sentence himself. The crowd turned toward him. Prince Aranya stepped out of the mantra circle. "What did you do?" Varen tried to answer. His voice came out as a dry whisper. The bell had cracked his ritual authority. He reached for another mantra. Nothing happened. For the first time in his adult life, Rajguru Varen stood before the king without sacred power, borrowed certainty, or 12 voices supporting his own. He looked very ordinary. I descended from the tower. Blood had reached my chin, and my hands shook, but the thunder resonance remained around my body. Varen stared at me. "You were a bell-keeper." "I still am." The oath judge rose. "Rajguru Varen, your authority is suspended. Your seals are void. Your temple accounts, palace offices, and private shrines are placed under royal audit." The prince removed Varen's ceremonial necklace. No one cheered. Not yet. People were too stunned. Varen had expected the bell to condemn a servant. Instead, it had done exactly what it was created to do. It had tested the oath. And the oath had answered. Varen's collapse spread faster than flood water. By midday, royal auditors had sealed his 3 offices. By sunset, they had found missing donations in 7 temple ledgers. Within 2 days, the total reached 38,000 silver panas, enough to repair every lower market drain twice. The money had moved through shell charities, false monsoon repairs, invented hermitages, and a grain fund managed by Badra Sen. The copper merchant's fraud had not been separate. Varen had used him to convert temple donations into private trade goods. Badra immediately claimed he had been deceived. The oath court reminded him that his own bell had already established a pattern of altered contracts. His license was revoked. Mira purchased his workshop at the public auction for 41 silver panas. She sent me a new bell afterward. It was beautifully cast. I preferred the cracked ones. The 11 reservoir workers confessed, after learning Varen's seals, could no longer protect their oath contracts. Most had been paid and threatened. 3 had known the full plan. Those 3 received prison labor repairing the channels they had damaged. The others were fined and required to testify. I asked the court not to punish their families. Varen had used fear downward and loyalty upward. I saw no reason to continue his method. The prince's spiritual faction collapsed. 6 nobles withdrew their support before the second audit day. 3 priests resigned. 2 claimed they had always distrusted Varen, which was impressive because I remembered both of them applauding at my exile. Prince Aranya appeared before the lower market without a canopy. He apologized publicly. It was not a perfect apology. Princes rarely apologized, without including several explanations of how badly informed they had been. But he restored the drowned families' names from my first timeline, even though they were alive now, and established a permanent reservoir witness council. Kavya received the first seat. She tried to refuse. I told her she had spent 3 days telling powerful men things they did not want to hear. That made her unusually qualified for government. My mother's shrine was returned with compensation. Because Varen's clerk had accepted the full inventory, the palace had become responsible for every neglected patient during the seizure. The royal treasury paid for medicines, repaired the well, replaced the roof, and funded 3 assistant healers for 1 year. My mother looked at the new shelves and said, "You should let priests seize the shrine more often." I told her once was enough. The naga beneath the well recovered after the copper binding was restored. On the 7th night, it left a single silver scale beside the bell. The scale carried river resonance. I fitted it beneath the central bell in my 12-bell circle. The shield's range doubled. Varen requested to see me on the 4th day. He was being held inside a stone guest cell rather than a dungeon because his final sentence had not been decided. His white robes were gone. He wore plain gray cloth. Without ceremonial oils and mantra light, he looked older than 46. "You knew," he said. "I learned." "How?" "That is not relevant to your hearing. You knew before the flood." "Yes." His fingers tightened. "You could have exposed me immediately." "No." "Why not?" "Because you controlled the records, the ceremony, the guards, the palace priests, and the prince's confidence. If I accused you without proof, you would have called it resentment." He looked away. That was exactly what he would have done. "I can still help the kingdom," he said. "My knowledge cannot be replaced." "Knowledge can be replaced. My connections cannot. Those are disappearing quickly." He leaned closer to the cell screen. "I can restore your family beyond anything the king will offer. Land, rank, a marriage alliance. I can name you high priest of the Eastern temples." Even stripped of authority, he still thought every person had a purchase price. "You seized my mother's shrine. I needed the river junction. You blamed me for a disaster you created. I needed a believable cause. You planned to drown the lower market." The district was supposed to evacuate after the first surge. That was the closest he came to remorse. Not grief. Scheduling dissatisfaction. I stood. He spoke quickly. "My ritual authority can be repaired. You understand the bell. Help me swear a restoration oath." A restoration oath requires full repayment, truthful confession, service to those harmed, and 7 years without priestly office. His face hardened. "That would destroy me." "No, it would leave you alive, accountable, and useful. You are confusing consequences with destruction." He offered me money again. Then rank. Then information about nobles who had supported him. I declined all 3. As I turned to leave, he asked the question that had been waiting beneath everything else. "Why are you not angry?" I stopped at the door. I was angry for 12 years. He did not understand. How could he? For him, the flood had happened 4 days ago. For me, I had already buried my mother, slept under ruined shrines, begged for work, crossed 7 kingdoms, and spent more than a decade imagining what I should have said in the oath court. Regression had not erased that life. It had only given me somewhere better to put it. "I am finished being angry," I said. "Now I am being accurate." The king offered me the position of junior royal priest. I refused. Then he offered senior royal priest. I refused more respectfully. The palace had not suddenly become wise because one corrupt man had fallen. It had become embarrassed. Embarrassment often disguised itself as generosity. I asked for something else. An independent charter. The Thunder Bell Wardens had not existed for 400 years. Their old authority had been divided among priests, reservoir keepers, market judges, and palace engineers, until no one person understood the entire system. I proposed restoring the order. The new warden would answer to the royal oath court, not the Rajguru. The office would inspect public bells, river bindings, monsoon shrines, and oath-based infrastructure. Its records would be copied in 3 locations. Its funding would come from fixed water duties, not optional temple donations. Any citizen could request a bell test by paying 1 copper pana, and those unable to pay could offer 1 hour of public work instead. The king asked how many assistants I required. I said 12. The prince asked whether all 12 needed noble training. I said none of them did. My first assistant was Kavya. Her official title was Witness of Gates. She complained that it sounded dramatic. I reminded her that she had followed armed reservoir workers through a storm while carrying flowers. The title was accurate. Mira became our copper supplier. The headwoman of Jaipur sent 2 river apprentices. The forest ascetic who had nearly attacked the snake spirit joined. After admitting his fire, mantra was less useful around frightened water beings than he had assumed. Even the embarrassed seizure clerk applied. He had learned more about obligation law in 1 morning at my mother's shrine than during 6 years in the palace office. We rebuilt the bell network across the lower district. The 12 scrap bells became 24. Then 48. By the end of the first monsoon month, every major bridge, market channel, healer's well, and reservoir gate carried a tuned warning bell. I continued cultivating. Sound strengthened my body in stages. Low tones settled into the legs and spine. Middle tones reinforced the ribs, shoulders, and breath. High tones sharpened timing and disrupted hostile mantras. The silver naga scale allowed me to carry river resonance without losing balance. The future clapper remained dangerous. I never struck it more than 7 times in 1 day. Most days I used it only once. Power was not proved by exhausting the strongest tool available. Power was proved by no longer needing it for ordinary problems. 3 months after the consecration, a group of dismissed priests tried to seize a monsoon shrine outside the northern gate. They formed a 7-man mantra circle and demanded recognition of Varen's old appointments. I arrived with 1 copper bell. They laughed. That reaction had become familiar. I struck the bell once. My thunderbody aura spread across the shrine courtyard. Their 7 mantras lost rhythm before the first verse ended. No lightning fell. No one was injured. Their magic simply stopped obeying false authority. They surrendered their seals before lunch. That was when the capital finally understood what a Thunder Bell Warden was. Not a musician. Not a servant. Not a decorative official who rang bells at festivals. A warden listened for the point where power and promise separated. Then he struck exactly there. Varen received his sentence at the end of the monsoon season. He lost his title, property, temple rank, and right to hold a ritual seal. His hidden wealth was used to repair the reservoir, compensate the lower market, and support the river villages he had endangered. He accepted the 7-year restoration oath. Not because he became humble overnight. Because the alternative was permanent severance from sacred practice. Consequences do not require a villain to become good. They require him to lose the ability to continue doing harm without cost. Prince Aranya remained heir, but the king dissolved his private priestly faction. For the next 3 years, All of the prince's appointments required oath court review. He complained once. Kavya rang the witness bell. He stopped complaining. My mother's shrine became the largest public healing house in the lower district. She still charged wealthy patients. She still accepted vegetables from poor ones. She still told everyone that my thunder aura was impressive, but useless against forgetting to eat. Some powers remain beyond cultivation. On the first anniversary of the flood that never happened, the lower market held a ceremony. 37 lamps floated down the river for the people who had died in my first timeline. No one else remembered them. I did. Kavya stood beside me on the ferry steps. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not returned?" she asked. "Every day. And does that make this life feel less real?" I listened to the bells across the district. Children were striking the small ones badly. Merchants were closing their shutters. Rain moved over the river in silver lines. "No," I said, "it makes it expensive." She looked at me. I touched the ruined future clapper beneath my robe. A second life is not free. You pay for it by remembering the first. The great bell sounded from the temple hill. One clear note. The river answered. Thunder gathered above the palace, not wild or angry but waiting. I raised one hand, breathed in for 4 counts, held for 2, and released for 6. The storm shifted away from the crowded market and broke over the empty northern fields. 400 years of silence had ended. I had returned as the servant everyone blamed, carrying the memory of a disaster no one else had survived. But bells remember pressure. Oaths remember betrayal. And when a second chance gives consequence a voice, even thunder knows exactly whose name to answer.